TFL EV is brought to you by Flow Charger, maker of reliable, high-quality charging stations for your electric vehicle. Hey, Tommy, guess what? We've got not one, but two electric Uber luxury cars to talk about. They were both unveiled and announced basically on the same day.
Yeah, pretty cool. So we've seen luxury full electric BEVs that are currently on sale, like the Tesla Model S, the Mercedes EQS, right? There's a bunch of them on the market. But these are hyper luxury cars that are looking to be more expensive than some folks' homes. So in this video, we're talking about the Rolls-Royce Spectre and the Cadillac Celestiq. And
I don't know.
We're going to talk about how they compare and what the difference is between the two of them. And it's pretty interesting that we're seeing kind of the electrification of some brands and some segments that we haven't currently seen.
Yeah, both of these guys are over $300,000, and they're both luxury coupes, and they're both being unveiled and introduced on the same day. Who would have thunk, Tommy? So, like I said, I don't know if it's Celestiq or Celestiq. I think I'm going to go with Celestiq. It sounds a little bit more bougie.
Sure, we'll go with it. But let's talk a little bit about some of the styling between these two vehicles, starting with the Rolls-Royce Spectre. So the 2024 Rolls-Royce Spectre makes good on a statement that the co-founder Charles Stuart Rolls said back in 1900. Can I read that for you?
Yeah, I'd love that.
So he said, "The electric car is perfectly noiseless and clean. There is no smell or vibration. They should become very useful when fixed charging stations can be arranged." And that was back in 1900, he said that. So finally making good on some promises.
Just 122 years later, huh?
The thing about that, though, is that we're still working on some of the fixed charging stations. But they're a lot better than they were 120 years ago.
Okay. Well, actually, looking at the Spectre, though, it's a pretty classic Rolls-Royce. The automaker says it's more or less the spiritual successor, Tommy, to the Phaeton Coupe.
Phantom Coupe.
Phantom Coupe. I thought it was Phaeton.
Nope. Phantom, yep.
Okay.
The headlight, the grille, the taillights are obviously very different, but the overall profile isn't as hyper-futuristic as the Cadillac. One interesting thing about the Rolls-Royce is that you have this kind of stacked headlight daytime running light design, and it apparently has one of the widest grilles that Rolls-Royce has ever put on any vehicle. So you still have the Spirit of Ecstasy, which has been redesigned, by the way. They put, I think, over 800 hours into redesigning the Spirit of Ecstasy. The grille still says Rolls-Royce, but of course, being an electric, you got to have a lot of thought toward aerodynamics.
So two questions looking at the image. First and foremost, why does it have a grille?
Well,
it
because
doesn't need one.
Well, Rolls-Royce wanted to make a big deal about how this car is tailored to a Rolls-Royce buyer, and they wanted to have a familiar design, familiar shape, and that's part of the reason. But if you look at the grille, it's actually pretty different than a standard gasoline Rolls-Royce grille in the way that the little veins are shaped.
Yeah, and there's at least according to this picture, there's nothing behind it. It's just there's no radiator back there. And what about the suicide doors? You like those?
Yeah, it's a two-door coupe in this model, and then the doors hinge from the rear. So it's got the wide opening doors. I think it's cool. I love that they're offering that.
You know, if it were me, instead of having the umbrella hidden in the door, I'd put like a retractable power cord.
That'd be cool.
Wouldn't that be cool? You just pull it out and plug it in.
So the interior is also fairly familiar, right down to some of the dashboard layout. The switches and the steering wheel. You do get a fully digital display. The first Rolls-Royce to have a fully digital display. I know some of the newer gas models do, but they have little bezels. This is just one flat piece of glass. There's a traditional clock still, though. You talked about the umbrellas already. And yeah, it's there's a lot of kind of old school Rolls-Royce in this. I thought maybe they go a little more futuristic on the styling, but it's very, very traditional Rolls.
I bet you that Spirit of Ecstasy, the cool thing about that is I remember doing a video with the Cullinan, right? And if you kind of like bat it or if you touch it, it kind of leaps into the grill, so you can't steal it. So I bet you that one does that as well.
It's also for pedestrian safety, right? You don't want to impale a pedestrian, so it retracts into the
yeah, it does that really quick.
Hood.
Yep. All right, well, let's talk about the Celestiq, which is a very different story because it's not made by a company that has traditionally been known for building $300,000 cars. That is GM. I think this is Cadillac's attempt at trying to redefine American luxury.
So the front end brings in black crystal shield grills, just like we see in the Lyriq, but it looks like no other Cadillac that has come before it. So there's a long sweeping roof line. It's pretty wild. It's got 23-inch wheels. Inside, you get 7 separate displays with nearly 100 inches of glass area. 2 displays for the driver. 2. Why do you need 2? 1 center console-mounted control display. You get a passenger display and very few physical buttons apart from the rotary dial and volume knob.
All right, let me ask you this. I'm pointing to the picture here. What is this back end?
Yeah, I don't
remind
like
you?
it.
Yeah, you know what that reminds me of?
What?
Jensen Interceptor.
I was just thinking that,
Yeah.
but not as good.
Okay.
I don't think they nailed it quite as well, especially from the rear. It's just kind of an odd-looking beast.
Jensen Interceptor 3, Tommy.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd-looking duck from the back. The front is beautiful, though.
You know what was the most unusual thing about the Jensen Interceptor?
When it had a Chrysler V8.
No, it was the first production car that had all-wheel drive.
That is the Interceptor FF.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
not the standard Interceptor.
Well, oh, now you're just showing off.
Yeah.
All right. Before we keep going with this, what do you think about this fact that Cadillac GM is selling $300,000, electric luxury vehicles? It seems to me that the brand was built by, selling Silverados, not by this.
Well, you can't look at GM as one brand. You have to
Right.
look at it as individual companies. And Cadillac has a long history, especially if you go back to the 40s and the 50s, of having the most luxurious
That's true.
cars.
They had 16 cylinders.
Yeah, that's right. Some of the most luxurious cars in the history of the world. So kind of a return to that. Of course, you pay the price for it, but I do love that they're doing more than just rebadging Chevrolet SUVs. So this is a really cool push for the brand, and I'm hoping that it pays off for them, although I just think it looks a little funky. Now, it has two rear displays, one for each passenger, and one rear center console display for the rear controls.
Now, Zach, our producer, wrote this. He said that it is bold and maybe a bit brash. It's a very American take on the flagship luxury EV. You just have to take your expectations and just add more to them. That's what he wrote right there, and I agree with that.
Now, the Rolls is a little bit more traditional by comparison. It's meant to ease current Rolls-Royce customers into the world of electrification, not kind of hit you over the head with a super futuristic design of the Cadillac. Now, speaking of tech, let's take a little bit more of a look at that.
Okay, the more traditional philosophy isn't to say the Spectre doesn't have a lot of tech. It rides on the same aluminum space frame architecture of luxury that underpins the current Phantom, Cullinan, and Ghost, Tommy.
Yep, it has a planar suspension system which helps Rolls-Royce achieve its hallmark magic carpet ride. It uses 18 sensors to monitor steering, braking, power delivery, and suspension movements to improve stability. It can also disconnect the anti-roll bar for individual wheel travel for better comfort. And we also have the Starlight headliner, which has now made its way to the available Starlight doors, which have 4,796 individual lights adding to the headliner.
Now, I got to say, when I drove previous models, I did like that headliner. And, with Rolls being very bespoke, you can actually pick the constellation of your choice that you want up on the ceiling. So you could pick whatever Starlight constellation you like. And I'm sure that'll be the same with the Spectre.
Now, the Cadillac packs tech absolutely everywhere. They're just smacking you over the head with technology. There are screens all throughout. It also has Ultra Cruise, which is Super Cruise, but on steroids. So it uses cameras, radars, and LiDAR sensors to work together to provide a hands-free driving on 2 million miles of roadways in the US and Canada. Currently, Super Cruise supports about 400,000 miles and mostly divided highways. This takes the technology a step further and gives a look at where GM is going with its hands-free tech in the future.
What will the next Cadillac have? Super Ultra Deluxe Cruise?
That's right.
Where else can you go after Super Ultra Cruise?
Just keep going. Just keep adding, yeah.
All right, let's talk about performance.
Yeah, so the Spectre has 577 horsepower, 664 pound-feet of torque. They would describe that as perfectly adequate in old-school Rolls-Royce terminology.
I'd say it's more than adequate.
Yeah, probably. But it's roughly the same output as the current twin-turbo V12 models. By comparison, the Phantom manages 563 horsepower and 664 pound-feet of torque. Now, it is a heavy beast. It weighs like 2.9 tons, so it's pretty weighty. But they're still saying 0 to 60 in about 4.4 seconds.
And top speed is limited to 155 miles per hour. Range is 260 miles per EPA figures, 320 miles for all you Europeans on the WLTP standard. And Rolls did not directly mention battery size in their announcement.
But assuming it's similar to the new BMW i7, right? Rolls-Royce is part of the BMW group, you should get right around 101.7 kilowatt hours of usable energy.
All right, well, what about the horsepower and torque numbers on the Cadillac, Tommy?
So Celestiq, 600 horsepower, 640 pound-feet of torque, so pretty similar output numbers.
Do you think they called each other?
Probably
the
not.
engineers?
No.
Isn't it weird how they come out at the same time with basically the same horsepower and torque, and it's funny how that works.
Now, of course, both the Rolls-Royce and the Cadillac have all-wheel drive. The Cadillac uses different gear ratios for the front and the back, and it's specifically calibrated to optimize range performance, but it looks to be slightly rear biased. And what's the 0 to 60 time?
3.8 seconds, according to GM's estimates, Tommy.
Yeah, and Cadillac did not mention the top speed, but for this type of car, it's probably quick enough. What about the range, Dad?
300 miles in what GM is targeting. 111 kilowatt hour battery pack, gross capacity, which means, usable is probably 5 to 10 kilowatt hours less. GM didn't mention usable, but it's a bit less, like I said. Probably somewhere, once again, what I just said.
Yeah, I think you got it. You're reading a little bit too much closely to the script there. So about 200 kilowatts of DC fast charging capacity. GM says it'll charge up to 78 miles of range in 10 minutes, but that will depend, of course, on how full the battery is. The Hummer EV will support up to 350 kilowatt fast charging because it's an 800 volt architecture, whereas the Caddy is a 400 volt system.
Yeah, I wonder why they went that route. You figure with a $300,000 car, I know the Caddy has a smaller battery than the Hummer, right, which is an 800 volt architecture, but I still would have liked to see 800 volt on a GM product that is the most expensive thing they built. At the end of this video, by the way, Tommy, I want to ask you which one, if you won the lottery, you would buy. So let's talk about pricing and availability.
Yeah, so the Cadillac is going to beat Rolls-Royce to the punch on actually announcing their flagship EV, but the tables might turn for launch window. So Rolls-Royce is targeting Q4 of 2023, so sometime from probably around a year from now. And then Cadillac, on the other hand, announced a more specific time period of December 2023, which is also Q4, but later in Q4.
So the Spectre may arrive first or it may not. It depends on when both companies can actually start production. If it's anything like the Hummer EV, then I suspect it might take a little bit longer. And now Cadillac plans to hand-build each Celestiq, Tommy, in order to order at its Global Technology Center in Warren, Michigan. So these things are hand-built.
So Rolls-Royce says the Spectre will be priced between the Phantom and the Cullinan, so probably somewhere in the high $300,000 to low $400,000 mark. And what does Cadillac say the Celestiq will start at?
North of $300K.
Yeah, so we're talking big bucks. Two very different approaches at luxury. Obviously, the Rolls-Royce is a two-door. The Cadillac is a four-door. The Cadillac has leather floors. Did you know that?
I knew that.
Leather-lined floors. The Rolls-Royce has leather everything. I don't think it has leather floors, though, because it's got those really woolly carpets. So very different kind of looks at what the future of...
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of leather floors.
Why not?
Because, Tesla redefined luxury as being very vegan and being very minimalist. And now, of course, we've gone back to, killing a lot of cows to cover both of these vehicles. And to me, that feels very like old man with cigar and a glass of whiskey with one of those giant ice cubes in it, right? It feels old as opposed to fresh and modern. But anyway, that's just my take. So let me ask you this, Tommy. If you won the lottery tomorrow and you had to buy either a Spectre or a Celestiq, which would you get? And you can't weasel out by saying neither.
Well, I think if you're in the market for $300,000 plus, a lot of folks really value the brand. And I have to say, I think Rolls-Royce really owns that ultra premium luxury kind of panache, right? So I think I'd probably go Rolls-Royce. Plus, I think that the Cadillac looks a little weird. So for me, it'd be the Rolls-Royce. But what about for you?
Probably the Rolls as well. It looks a little bit station wagon-y to me, which is fine. I love station wagons.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that. But let's be real. We have to drive them, which we probably won't because we didn't get invited to either of these cars launches. So sitting in the peanut gallery, kind of looking at it from what we've been given as a press release, I think to me, the Rolls-Royce just has 122 years or more of bespoke. And Cadillac seems to have kind of gone away from that and now it's trying to come back to it. So I guess if you're pulling up to the club, the Rolls may have a little bit more cachet.
Well, let us know what you think in the comment section below. As always, has been Tommy.
And Roman saying thanks for watching. Remember, check out alltfl.com if you want to stay up on the latest and greatest in not just EVs, but trucks, off-road, motorcycles, and classics. Tommy, you've done a really fun classics video. And by the way, speaking of classics, we are selling our 1997 Mustang GT. It's on TFLbids.com right now. So if you're interested in a cool and very well maintained and loved Mustang GT, the SN95, check it out.